was two islands. So one is called Naisar, which is the bigger one, and one is called Agnesar, which is a smaller one, but both have a coastal defense department section. So first we lived on a smaller island. No, my mother was born in Latvia. My dad was born in Estonia. In the First World War, my mom met my dad, and they fell in love very fast. So they got married. I think my mom was 18 and my dad was 19.
Ingrid's father's name was Leopold Martinsen. He was a decorated officer from World War I with the Estonian Marines and assigned to the coastal defense of Tallinn. Her mother was Elizabeth Austrin. Ingrid was their only child.
And then when I was 6 years old, my father got transferred. All the officers who lived there, they got free accommodation, they got free housing, and then you could grow your own vegetables or whatever you wanted. So our house was very close to the ocean. Opened a new school. So we didn't have a schoolhouse, so we actually went to school. It was one school room, it was one room made available for all the school children in school age, which were about 14 or 16 children in different ages. And we went to school in some kind of a mess hall from the soldiers or something. They just got one room for us and brought school benches in. We had a real school, and we had only one teacher who taught all the grades. We had like a couple of first graders, couple of third graders, and maybe two fifth graders or whatever it was. I taught in the first grade. So the first day I went to school, I had a teacher who was actually some kind of from the country somewhere, an older man. He was a man teacher, and he was real nice. So he was explaining if we want to go out, which he meant to go to the bathroom, we just had to put the hand up and then go out. The bathroom, because the bathroom wasn't even in that same building. It was somewhere else because it was on the base. So I decided, okay, I wanted to go out. I didn't know what that out meant. So I put my hand up, I'd like to go out. So I went out to play it all afternoon, never went back to school. So I got in trouble already the first day. I had scarlet fever when I was about 7. And I was very sick. Everybody on that island had scarlet fever. Mm-hmm. But I was one of the sickest ones. So first they were sending serum down by planes, throwing a package of serum down for injections. There was only one doctor on the whole island. But I didn't get better, and they knew they had to put me in a hospital because I was really half dying. So my father his best friend was the admiral of the Navy. So he called the admiral up and said that I was really sick, so he sent this ice scraper, just especially for me to take it to the hospital in the mainland. Mm-hmm. And the ice scraper was a big ship, and it couldn't even come close to the island, so it was like 2 kilometers away because of being, frozen, and not only that, because it would get shallow then. So they I was put into 10 blankets probably, and about 10 soldiers had to carry me because it was such a heavy package. Mm-hmm. And they carried me into the ship 2 or 3 kilometers along the ice, and my mother and me were going on the boat then to the mainland, and I was in the hospital for 9 weeks.
9 weeks?
Yeah. 6 weeks with scarlet fever, and then I had complications with kidneys. So the 3 weeks were to treat my kidneys after that.
Was that in Tallinn?
Yeah, that was in Tallinn.
Ingrid's mother's parents lived on a large estate known as Bara near the town of Evele in Latvia. Heinrich Austrin had 2 sons who died in World War I. His wife died when she was young, about age 40. He had a daughter who died at age 3 in an accident drinking lye. He had another daughter. This daughter was Ingrid's godmother, died in 1923 when Ingrid was just a few months old. This left him one son and one daughter, Elizabeth, Ingrid's mother. Heinrich died in 1926, and he left his estate to his children. Heinrich, his son, his remaining son, moved on to the estate. He was an engineer, and his wife's name was Vale, Ingrid's aunt. Heinrich died in 1939, and in 1940, when the Russians invaded, they divided Bara into about 40 different communal farms, leaving Vala just the main estate. Vale left in 1944 with her best friend and the foreman for the farm, and eventually settled in Chicago, where she died in about 1974. Ingrid visited the farm and saw the ruins of the barn and the farmhouse, and was able to find the family cemetery plot in Avonlea, which has the Austrians, including Engineer Austrian, Heinrich.
When I was 11 years old, my parents divorced. They didn't get along, I had no idea why, but they divorced. So my mother and I moved to the capital, which was like 2 hours by ferry from the island. My mother and I moved to the city, to Tallinn, and we rented a 2-bedroom apartment, and my mother had a hard time for me to find a school. I started the 5th grade. So she found a real nice, it was all girls public elementary school, but it was just girls.
Mm.
So I had a very hard time in the beginning. I had to get a tutor because that teacher whom we had there, this country teacher, didn't bring us all up to date. I had bad time with square roots, and math was very bad for me. I couldn't understand a thing when I went to the big school. So I had tutors and the tutor really taught me math real good, which became my strongest subject in school. And naturally I wanted to go in academic high school because it was more prestigious to go there and not go to just to some commercial high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I passed my exam with flying colors. I studied hard and I got through, so I was very happy. But then my father had married, and his second wife was a very young woman, was like 20 years younger than my father. And so then I met her, and she was introduced to me as not as like a stepmother. She was introduced to me as an aunt. Like in my country, I mean, for respect, you do not call an older person just by first name. That person also has a title.
Mm-hmm.
Either it's an aunt or uncle or whoever. So instead of saying Mother Vera, she was my Aunt Vera. That's my father wanted that way. He did not want to take like the position of my mother away.
Mm-hmm.
That I would have like two mothers. That I had like a mother, and then my father's wife's name was Aunt for me. And in 1940, in June, they just marched in. We had a non-aggressive pact with Russia from the First World War. But they just marched in and took over the whole country and arrested first night all our president and vice president and everybody else was arrested. I remember that day real well. Junior in high school. And so our school was completely changed. Most of our principals were, if they did not belong to the Communistic Party, their jobs were taken away from them. They put some communistic people in charge. So like our school dean, like you call it, the principal, he was degraded as an elementary school teacher because he was not didn't belong to the Communistic Party, didn't want any part of it. And the president was right away arrested, our president and vice president and all the Congress people and justice people, and the jails were open up, all the criminals were let out. So there was a terrible situation. So like every teenager, we all got very rebellious about it. So we had all kinds of rebellious songs about communists, and My mother was always worried about me that I get arrested because having all those songs and stuff, I had it all written down. She said, memorize those things. I don't want to have somebody come into the house and sneak around and find these. We'll be in jail too. We're not homeowners anymore. And all the landowners were not landowners anymore. It was all kolkhoz. They call it kolkhoz, collective fund. Everything was collective. All the store owners were not store owners anymore. They were the managers. So all the personal property was taken away. The Germans came in 1941. Yeah. So we had the Russian regime actually from 40 to 41. I graduated in 42. Then I worked in several offices. During the Russian time, I worked in the telegraph office. I learned how to use the Morse code machine, sending telegrams out, which was really interesting job. So, and then later on, I worked in several Estonian establishments, and I got a good job with the German in the German office since I spoke German, so I was like a typist, and the life went pretty good.
So you could speak Estonian and German and Russian a little
Fluently
bit,
at that time, yes.
and English?
English, I had English since my 5th grade. So I had English 8 years. Six years in high school and then 2 years in elementary school. So it's eight years English I had. I was working for the Germans on the Russian border. And I had a good job, I got good pay, I lived by myself, which I liked, and I had a really good time there. So then one night we had a real bad bombing, and so they were telling that the Russians are pushing the Germans away again. You know, the Russians were coming forward again. So we were all, in the middle of the night, we were all told to pack our things, that our whole office is going to be evacuated into maybe about 100 kilometers away into another town. So we packed everything that we could. So we were waiting for these trucks to come in because we had our things all packed together, our clothing and what we had. My mother had given everything that belonged to me and said in the case something happens in Tallinn, at least I had my stuff, like my silver and stuff. We were like hope chests. So I had everything together. So we were waiting for these big German trucks to come and transfer us over. And everybody was saying that the place where the trucks are coming are taken already over by the Russians. So we didn't believe it, and our boss didn't let us go either. All of a sudden we hear this big commotion, and already 2 big tanks are coming through the woods, and we still are standing there in a place to wait for the stupid trucks. So everybody was running for their life where to go. And I'll never forget this running. So there was a big wheat field, so we're running down the valley into the wheat fields, and there's Russian tanks are on top there, and they're shooting, and 2 Russian soldiers jumped off the truck, and they're shooting with this machine guns, and we are laying there. We ended up like, I had my boss beside me, and another Estonian girl who was his secretary, and me. I happened to be right in there. We were all laying in the wheat fields to be quiet, wait for Russians don't see us. And then I thought, that is stupid to wait here, so I just got up, and they were holding me together. Don't get up, because they're going to shoot you to death. I said, I'm not going to stay here and wait till the Russians find me. So I just kind of run by myself through these wheat fields, and still shooting behind us, but it kind of got farther, and must have run about 5 kilometers. I don't know how far, it must have been 5 kilometers. I was getting up from the valley up again. And there was these German soldiers, there was a communication department or whatever it was, and they were widening the wires on a spool, and saying that there was some kind of a communication problem in that city. So I said, you're ridiculous. This city is just taken by the communists, by the Russians. So they jumped into the truck and started taking off, and I was just standing there. I said, what I'm going to do now? And for a moment, I mean, they were maybe 10 yards away from me, you know. For a moment, there was like a big hole or something. They had to kind of slow down. it wasn't going fast anyway, so but it slowed down, and I don't know, the three jumps I was there, and I jumped on a truck in the behind, and it was a covered truck, so they didn't even see me first, and then I was screaming in the back because I felt like I was falling down, I was holding myself, and so they pulled me in. So we have traveled with this truck. I traveled with this truck for a long time, and you saw the Germans were all going in every direction, big troop moving. One was going this way, ones were going that way. Everybody was trying to find their troops. And so, I don't know, I was like, day was then, and then I found out that they were going in the wrong direction. They were going to Latvia, because they had found out that their unit is pulling into Latvia. So I said, that's opposite direction to Tallinn, so I got off that truck. Then I wandered a little bit around, and I got to another truck. I was trying to get back into Tallinn. I had nothing with me except my clothes on. Everything was lost. In the meantime, my shoes had broken too from the running. So then I finally got to a railway station, and I begged if I can, take a train. Well, I finally got to the train. I got home. In September, they were already in front of Tallinn, and there was fighting going in the night. We heard it. So I got my job back again in Tallinn to work for the German office.
The communication office.
Yeah, and they said to me to go home, pack my things, that it's lost, and take my mother, because they had some ships, they were hospital ships, and there is room for my mother and me. They wanted me to get out. They were nice enough to tell. So I went home to tell my mother to pack the things and go. My mother didn't want to go because she had just done some shopping and felt like it was safe enough and all this, and I had to really convince her that it is lost, that the Russians are coming, we're not going to stay. So finally I got her convinced, and we went to the harbor, and there were a lot of Estonians waiting for empty ships or room in the ships, and we got into a hospital ship, and we landed in Danzig, and that had to be September the 20th. We left my own country.
And that's when there was another ship that was torpedoed?
Yeah, you see, our captain, he decided to leave in the night. The other ship left in the morning, and the one which left in the morning was in the area where it was all mines and torpedoes during the day, where it was the worst zone to go around the corner where Latvia is and all this to the open sea. And you see, Latvia was in the same situation. They had the Russians had occupied there too, so it would be easy for them to come from there. So our ship captain decided we're going past that in the night, which saved our life. We did have 2 Russian planes fly over us, but they didn't do anything. Maybe because we had the hostile flag on it too. I don't know why they didn't do it, because we were very worried that we were going to be killed. So we got to Danzig in Germany.
While Ingrid and Elizabeth escaped Tallinn in 1944, her father, Leopold Martinsen, now known as Piep Meiste, married to Vera with children, remained.
Father's father had been a forester, like employed by the government, like a ranger. You call it here ranger, and so they had a free housing. And then he died young, and my grandmother had to move out of that free housing with all those little children. I don't know how old those kids were, and so all the relatives, our family of my father's side had a big family.
Yeah.
So they all built a little cabin type of a temporary house for my grandmother just to live there till they built her a bigger house. Well, that bigger house was never built. So she raised all those kids in that small house. It's a very small little cabin, as I remember.
Leopold Martinsen, Ingrid's father, was a decorated officer in the Estonian military.
Since he had been a good fighter, he got an honorary, was given an for his honor, and that was, I don't know if that was customary or whatever it was, but they gave him all the good fighters who had earned so many medals or whatever, they also gave them a piece of land. So my father had a piece of land which was in his hands as long as I remember. So when he took his full retirement, he moved to that piece of land that started like farming.
And was that off the island then?
Oh, that was on the mainland. Yeah, that was close to that was in the middle of Estonia.
In 1940, when the Russians occupied Estonia, Pip was forced to share his farmhouse with another family. In 1941, when the Germans occupied Estonia, Pip let this family stay on at the farmhouse. He also began working with the Germans in their recruitment office. In 1944, the Russians returned, and the family that Pip had let stay in his house betrayed his work with the Germans. The Soviets arrested him and sent him to work in a mine in Siberia. In 1945, Vera, unable to pay her bills and destitute, is forced to give up all her children to relatives and join Pip in Siberia, where they have another daughter. Pip returned to Estonia with Vera and his daughter in 1961 to rejoin his family. Upon his return to Estonia in 1960, Pip was able to make contact with Ingrid. This was the first time Ingrid knew that Pip was alive since 1944. He corresponded with Ingrid by letters. I found letters from every house, starting in Vancouver, through all her houses in Kansas, and then on to Fort Lauderdale. Pip lived to see his 80th birthday in 1975. And then one day, Ingrid received a telegram. Her father had died. She'd never seen her father again since 1944. In 1993, Ingrid finally returned to Estonia after 49 years, 18 years after her father had died. While he was gone, many of her relatives were still there, all her brothers, her sisters, and Vera, and all of the children. This was a glorious event, and the Estonian flag was raised in her honor. Let's rejoin Ingrid in 1944 as they've traveled down to Germany.
They fed us, they gave us free tickets wherever we wanted to go. So my mother and I decided to go to Flensburg because his German had told us to go to Flensburg and his family would be nice to us. So we went there and we lived in a hotel first. We visited those people, but they didn't offer us any pay, so we had enough money, so we stayed in a hotel. My mother got a job, I got a job, just some little job. I worked in office and my mother worked in office, and life was getting pretty good to us. But then the Germans said that they can have this kind of refugees in that town. That we got all rounded up again, but in the meantime there are Latvians there, Lithuanians there, Estonians, and we were supposed to go to Stettin. So we were all transferred, everybody who was there was transferred to Stettin. And they put us into police. There was a police academy or whatever it was, but it was barracks and all this police, the German police there. And so we stayed in those barracks. And we got free food there. We had also friends in Dresden, which is in the middle of Germany, which is now was East Germany. My mother had a friend there. She had met some German soldier who felt like my mother was his mother. So he had always told my mother, if you ever come to Germany, you have to come and visit my mother. So we went then to this, since a couple of people were left, I don't know how many, maybe 50 people were left, we were told that we had to get out. If we have a place to go, we can get out. So we decided to go and visit them, just to get out from this place, because we were really worried they're going to do something with us. So we said we wanted to go to Dresden, so we got another free ticket. And so we went to Dresden. And those people were very nice to us. We stayed with them like a week. Um, so these people were very nice to us. They gave us lodging and they were feeding us, and we felt really embarrassed because everything was rationed. So we said we're going to try to find jobs, and maybe when we get jobs, then we're going to work. I mean, then we're going to find a place to live and all this. Well, it was like catch 22. Every morning we take a bus to go downtown to City Hall. City Hall says you have to have living permit before find a job. We go to the labor office. The labor office says you have to have. We go to the to get the living permit. They said you have to have a job in order to live, and they did that to us like a week. So one day I was so mad. Again, this rigmarole back and forth. So I noticed that they were always going into some office, and I figured it out. That has to be the boss's office. So I was showing that statement again, and they again, oh, these stupid refugees, They ignored it again, so I said, I'm going to teach them a lesson. So I just opened this door, and there was this boss sitting there at his desk, and I'm screaming into his face, showing him this paper, and I said, is this the way how you treat people who, help you to fight the war? And my mother outside was thinking I will never come out alive, But I was so mad. So he came out and told us guys there in the front office to do something about, to give us some kind of a permission. So now they said they can't type, and we have to come back another day. So I opened, they had like a wooden barrier, how those old offices are. I opened the thing, I said, I can type it up for you if you can't type. I had to type this certificate out myself and run to the post again and sign it with the stemple in German. I got it done. So we got 2 weeks permission to stay. We decided we're going to leave again. After 2 weeks, we didn't want to be on those people. The two weeks at least helped us to get food tickets. There was ration food, so we could give those people something, so that they could feed us, and we felt bad from their rations we ate, their food. So after 2 weeks we decided, we heard that there is refugee camps in Czechoslovakia, which was not part of, it's called Sudetengal, which is a German part of Czechoslovakia, which a German took. So one day we were in one of those cafeterias with some other friends, my mother and I, and we were all talking how depressing this time is, and we just find the jobs to do something, and some 2 German officers came over and started talking to me. So I was telling them all the story, and since my mother and I spoke German, we all spoke German. And so this one officer was really interested. He must have liked me or something. Anyway, he gave me some name and said, tell so-and-so is sending you, and I'm sure you get the job. So I went next day, and I sure got the job with the German army or whatever, and as a typist. And then I had regular income, and that's when we rented our apartment in some German family just rented 1 room for us, so we had to cook on their stove. But at least we got out of that camp, and I had a pretty good job there. So the Germans were retreating, so I went home to my mother and said, we better get our things out and start retreating too, because the Russians are coming in, and we escaped once, we better escape again. So we couldn't even we had things in those people's basement in the case of bombing and stuff, and those people already had left, so whatever we had in a basement suitcase, we didn't get it out. So whatever we had in our apartment, we just got out. And we got into some German truck and drove, and the Russians were still bombing till May the 9th. And oh, what a terrible escape that was. I mean, like everybody was trying to get into the one direction from from 4 directions to go all in one direction. I mean, there were traffic was waiting. It was mostly refugees, then German caravans of soldiers with their trucks and whatever. Everybody was going to try to get west, away from those Russians. So the Russians were coming and shooting with machine guns out of their planes, and we had to run into the woods every time and or in the ditches. And the Americans were there. The Americans had occupied that part, and it was really nice. And now we were there. There must have been about 40 people in this place, civilians, and these Americans were very nice, were feeding us and giving us food and all this. So we thought paradise has come. And that was the first time I ever saw Americans trying to talk my English. After 8 years English, couldn't speak English. I understood them, but I wasn't able to speak a word. Americans came to us to tell us that they have to retreat now because this part is going to be given to the Russians. And it's going to be an hour time when there's nobody there. So if any of us wants to go through on our own risk, not to be caught for the Russians, it's on our own risk we can do. They cannot take us with them. So that's what I did. The minute the Americans left and the Russians didn't come, everybody took off in every direction they wanted to go. So that's done by foot. Now we are walking.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever we had still to carry, suitcases with clothes, and we got caught. They had the translator there with them, so they caught us, and they put us in the jail now because we were walking, we were away from home base more than 50 miles, which we didn't even have at home base, so without the permit, so they put us in the jail, so we were 15 days in jail, which was very easy. That was not like a regular jail, it was like only confined quarters. The Americans were very nice, feeding us and giving us all the freedom we wanted. We were allowed to even go during the day into town and then back again. They were very nice to us. And then they gave us permits. And then we found out that there was a big Estonian refugee camp in Gunzenhausen, which was maybe another 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers to go. Now we had the permit, my mother and I had the permit, so we just walked and walked till we got to Gunzenhausen. And I got a job as a telephone company. And one day we had to go to the American military government for some kind of a paper. And that's when I saw your dad first time.
Helmut and Ingrid married in 1947. They had their first child, Astrid, in 1948. Living with Elizabeth in Gunzenhausen, Helmut eventually began work with the German consulate. They had another child, Ingo, in 1951. And in 1953, Helmut was assigned to Vancouver. He left for Vancouver, and Ingrid and the children followed shortly thereafter, with the plan to have Elizabeth to follow them after they were established. While in Gunzenhausen, Ingrid had continued to work where she could, only to take breaks for when her children were born. When she left, all of her employers had written glowing references to her and her industrious and brilliant work as a clerk and a typist and as a secretary. Before Elizabeth could join Ingrid and Helmut and their family in Vancouver, she had complications rising from appendicitis and died suddenly and unexpectedly in Gunzenhausen, and she's buried there. Ingrid and Helmut found a thriving Estonian and German community in Vancouver. This provided a very active social life, and they made many friends. Ingrid also enjoyed Estonian traditional dance in her traditional costumes. Unfortunately, Helmut and Ingrid had some difficulties, and Helmut left Ingrid for a brief period. He rejoined her, and they had another child, Peter, in 1958. In 1962, the family went back to Europe for a very memorable vacation, using a ship going both ways across the ocean. In 1962, Helmut was assigned to Kansas City. The family moved there in 1963. 4 years later, Helmut refuses an assignment to return to Germany and starts in hotel management. This eventually leads to a job as general manager of the Marlin Beach Hotel in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the family moves there. Only now, Ingo has graduated from high school and Astrid is in college. Only a few months later, Helmut loses his job at the Marlin Beach and leaves Ingrid and goes to Baltimore. He does return to Fort Lauderdale later, but only to divorce Ingrid. Peter and Ingrid stay at the Marlin Beach in an apartment, and at this time Ingrid begins a friendship with Dana Harrington. As a bank teller, as she had in Kansas City throughout this time, and she and Peter lived together in a variety of apartments, and Dana was their constant companion. She enjoyed visiting Marco Island with Dana. Astrid and Ingo both came back to Fort Lauderdale for about a year, both leaving in 1974 for the Pacific Northwest. In the early 1970s, Ingrid took a second job at Pompano Park Harness Track. She was a teller at this track for over 30 years, all the way up through age 80 years old. In 1976, Ingrid purchased a condominium, Royal Park Condominiums. Once Peter left for college, she moved here and stayed here for the next 28 years of her life. In 1975, Astrid had a daughter, Amanda Z. Thomas. Amanda was Ingrid's first granddaughter. Ingrid and Dana stayed companions to their ends. Ingrid's family grew. Bobby married Ingo, Julie married Peter, and Lonnie married Astrid. Ingrid welcomed 5 grandsons, 2 great-granddaughters, and 1 great-grandson. Like her father, she lived to age 80 before she died. Ingrid was a very active person. She enjoyed bowling every week, playing bingo, and playing Scrabble. She enjoyed the ocean and swimming and camping trips. The family remembers all the camping trips with her over the years. She loved animals. How many times you could see her trying to feed or care for some pet or animal.
Very good.